Good morning, and someone's got their microphone on. Okay. Good morning and welcome to the Planning and Placemaking Committee of the 5th of June 2024. I'm Councillor Ian Massey and I'm the convener of this committee. I'll now introduce the top table to you. On my left, far left, is Councillor Grant Stewart, my vice convener, Miss Jessica Gill, Democratic Governance Officer, and Mr Jeff Fogg, Legal Manager. And on my right is Mr Sean Panton, Team Leader Major Developments, and Mr Paul Williamson, Team Leader Local Developments. A bit of housekeeping, as this is a hybrid meeting, members joining virtually are reminded that if you leave the meeting during consideration of any application, you are unable to participate or vote on that item when returning to the meeting. This also means that if a member loses their internet connection during consideration of an item, they should not vote on that item. Please advise the clerk via the meeting chat that you are leaving the meeting, or if you have lost your connection and are therefore unable to vote on that item. And whilst we are operating as a hybrid meeting for today's proceedings, can I remind councillors and officers to use the chat box function to attract my attention, which all members have access to. Q for questions, C for comments. I will now ask the clerk to confirm any apologies and the attendance of those in the chamber. Thank you.
Thank you, Convener. We have apologies today from Councillor Leishman with Bailey substituting, Councillor James with Councillor Anderson substituting, and Councillor Waters with Councillor McPherson substituting. We've got two members online. Please confirm you're present. Councillor Reid?
Present. Good morning.
Thank you. And Bailey Williamson?
Present.
Thank you. All other members are in the chambers.
Thank you. Item 2, declarations of interest. Do any members have a declaration of interest? If they do, please put DI in the chat. We go to Bailey.
Thank you, Convener. I'm conscious that I've already taken a public position on item 6, therefore I'll recuse myself from the chamber for the duration of that item. Thank you.
Thank you. Bailey Williamson.
Yes, I have a declaration of interest for item 3, so I'll recuse myself from that particular item too.
Thank you for that. Item 3, the minutes. The minutes of the meeting of the Planning and Placemaking Committee of the 8th of May. Can we agree the content of the minute? We do have deputations. Can I ask the committee, are they give permission for deputations to be heard on items 511, 521. Yeah. And on behalf of the committee, I'd like to extend a warm welcome to the deputations and members of the public watching today. Your request to speak has been granted. You will be called to the lectern as we reach the relevant item on the agenda and permitted 10 minutes to speak, followed by a period of time for questions from members. It is requested that the content of the deputation is kept relevant to the planning consideration, and please ensure that when answering questions, your response remains relevant and direct to the questions asked. Item 5, applications for determination. We swiftly move on to the major application, and this is for the erection of 209 dwelling houses, formation of SUDs, landscaping, associated works, approval of matters specified in conditions of 15/01237/IPM, LDP site MU27, land 300 metres south west of Tynaqual, Breock Road, Crieff. And to introduce the report is Mr Panton.
Thank you, Convener. Good morning, councillors. As stated, the first item on the agenda today is for the erection of 209 dwelling houses on Breock Road, Crieff. The site is allocated in LDP2 as a mixed-use development site and also benefits from a planning permission in principle. Members should be advised that only one public objection was received regarding the proposed development, and the application is only before you today as it constitutes a major development. I will now take members through a short presentation to detail the proposals further. Next slide, please. Here we can see the location of the site, which lies to the south of Broich Road and is predominantly surrounded by agricultural fields. To the north and northeast of the site, you can see Crieff Primary School and Crieff High School, and to the west you can see the Ogilvie Homes development known as Drovers Gate. This Ogilvie Homes development also forms part of the same mixed-use allocation in the local development plan. Next slide, please. We now have an extract from our LDP showing the mixed-use allocation referred to. The site, known as MU7, is the purple area to the south of Crieff. The proposal before you today is fully within this allocation. Next slide, please. This plan shows the approved in-principle master plan. The orange area to the left is the Ogilvie Homes development, and the orange area to the right is the proposal before you today. The green area is the scheduled ancient monument, which will not be developed upon as part of this proposal. And again, the proposal before you is fully within the boundaries of the previously approved in-principle application. Next slide, please. We now have the proposed site plan. Here you can see the general arrangement proposed. Of the 209 units, 157 will be for private sale and 52 will be affordable units. The development also accommodates a diverse mix of 2, 3 and 4 bedroomed homes. Next slide, please. Zooming in on the northern part of the site now, you can see here the 2 vehicular access points onto Broich Road and a further vehicular access connecting to the Ogilvie Homes development to the west. You can also see on this plan the extent of green space and tree planting proposed. Next slide, please. Moving to the southern part of the site, here you can make out the location of the Suds Basin and some more of the landscaping. Next slide, please. We now have a typical elevation plan. Each house will be finished in either a smooth white or pale render with a brown or grey facing brick base course and terracotta or grey roof tiles. The doors and windows will be white UPVC. Next slide, please. Here we can see some of the boundary treatments proposed, which include walling with feature pillars. This will help to ensure a positive streetscape. I will now take members through a series of photographs taken on my site visit on the 20th of May. Next slide, please. This first photograph shows Broich Road looking onto the site. The first of the access points will be taken from just beyond the closest sign to the right of the image. Crieff Town Centre is in the direction of the yellow arrow. Next image, please. This next image shows Broich Road, again this time looking back towards Crieff. To give you your bearings, Crieff Skate Park is shown by the red arrow. Please note that recommended condition 3 of the consent requires a number of upgrades to this road, including the widening of the carriageway to 6 metres, the installation of a two-king crossing, and a footway along the southern boundary with associated bus stops. Next slide, please. This photograph shows the site looking back towards Crieff Primary School, which is denoted by the orange arrow. Next slide, please. This slide now shows the site when looking in the northeastern direction, looking towards Crieff High School, which is denoted by the pink arrow. Next image, please. This penultimate photograph shows the site when looking in the southeasterly direction. You can see here the mature tree belt which bounds the site. Next image, please. This final image shows the remains of a former sheep dip which is present on the site. This will be removed in its entirety, and recommended condition 9 will ensure that any ground contamination is dealt with appropriately. Next slide, please. Thank you, Convener. That now concludes my presentation. I will leave members with the proposed site plan for reference.
Thank you, Mr. Panton. And we do have deputations on this item. So I'll now hand over to the Vice Convener for the deputations procedure.
Thank you, Convener. We have no actual deputations, but we do have Mr. McCallum, agent, and a supporting team from Persimmon Homes to take questions. So if members have got questions, if you populate the chat box, and we'll call the team up if needed. Convener Massey. Sorry, members, I'd help if we invited Mr. McCallum and the team up to the lectern. Would you like to join us? So we have Mr. McCallum, agent, accompanied by Mr. Patrick, Ms. Carruthers, Mr. McLaughlin, and Mr. Scotland for Persimmon Homes. Convener Massey.
Thank you. My question is on the affordable homes. There's 52 affordable homes going into the site, which I'm very pleased about. Can you give me some indication of the scheduling of the homes? When will these be built? Is it the first homes that are going to be set? What can you give me some indication of that, please?
Yeah, the affordable homes are in the northwestern portion of the site. If you look at the site plan there, close to the sort of northwestern boundary near where the Ogilvie site is. So in terms of programming of the site, they would be early on in the development. Probably you'd be coming in off Broik Road, but they'd be within the early phases of the development.
Bailey Williamson.
Thank you, Deputy Convener. My question is about the Suds Pond, and I was just wondering whether there was going to be a form of fencing put around the edges of it. I don't seem to be able to see that on the plans that have been produced, but I was just wondering if there's going to be, as I say, a form of safety fencing put around it.
The Suds Pond here, I can confirm in my technical, it's not a wet pond. It would be a dry basin, so it would only be wet in very wet circumstances. So the majority of the time it would be a dry just depression in the ground effectively, so there wouldn't be any safety fencing around it, but we don't think there would be a safety issue because it wouldn't generally be a pond as such.
Councillor Braun.
Thanks, Vice Convener. I'm following on from the convener's question regarding affordable housing. Two bits really. One is, have you decided what sort of style they're going to take? Are they going to be shared ownership or social rent or mid-market rent? First question. The other thing is there's 52 of them, and it's normal in policy that they are interspersed throughout the site, and I just wonder why they're all being clumped into one area, because it's normal for them, especially when you have such a large number, to be spread throughout the whole development.
Yes, I believe all 52 are for social rent. Expected to be with Kingdom Housing Association. In terms of the location of them, when they are social rent, our experience with the housing associations is they look to have them in one location for management of them, because they're taking on 52 houses and they need to have them centrally to be able to manage them. So they kind of would be resistant to having them pepper potted around the site when they are for social rent. It's a bit different if they're different tenures.
Councillor Allen.
Well done, Jeff. Thank you. Thank you, Vice Convener. 207 houses. Have you got any forward thoughts on how many kids would be living within those housing stock, and are there room at the schools, the primary school and the secondary school, to accommodate them?
I think in terms of number of children that we would expect to have within that development, that's not something we would assess, but the application's been through the council's education team, and they've asked for a contribution towards the primary school, which we'll be paying as part of a Section 75 contribution. So it will be covered through that mechanism.
Councillor Braun.
Thanks, Vice Convener. Press releases in the past have indicated that there's been problems at other Persimmon homes with drainage. Have we learnt the lesson on that, and will this be a situation where it won't happen again?
Yeah, absolutely, and I think it's well known that we've had some issues on some sites in the past. But I think if you look at press, if you look at our customer service scores over the last couple of years, there's been a pretty relentless drive on quality within the company, change of management over the last 3 or 4 years. So I think if you look at further phases of developments we're doing in Perth and Kinross, it's a different story to earlier ones. So I think we've got a much renewed focus on delivering quality, and that goes through all elements of the build, including that aspect. So I don't think we would expect to see any issues in the way we did, and obviously lessons were learned from previous bad examples.
Gentlemen, there doesn't appear to be any questions, but we'll give it a moment or two. My experience over the years. Gentlemen, there appears to be no further questions, so you're free to go. Convener, I'll hand back to yourself.
Thank you, Vice Convener. Can I ask the committee if they have any questions for officers? Bailey McLaren.
Thank you, Convener. Yeah, my question is in regard to the construction traffic. I have a slight concern. This site sits very close to two schools. And I'm aware of an incident in another area of Perthshire where outside a school, construction traffic related to a housing site, there was a near accident with a child running in front of a HGV. So I have a concern about the traffic flow, the HGVs at that time of the morning, and equally we also have further along the road our recycling centre where HGVs use this route. There's agricultural traffic, so it's a really busy route. So could we have a consideration about the timings of HGV traffic? Thank you.
Yes, certainly, Bailey McLaren. So condition 8.p, that's about the construction traffic management scheme. That requires them to submit details of HGV movements to and from the site. They need to submit that to us for consideration. And school hours are definitely something we do take into consideration. So I can give you assurance that we won't be permitting any HGV movements within the peak school drop-off and pick-up times.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bailey Williamson.
Yeah, just returning to the point that was making about the SUD scheme and looking at the plans for the SUD scheme, the water level seems to be about 2 meters. The plans seem to show very steep sides, and I was just wondering or seeking advice on, is there can we condition some mitigation measures for water safety, like life belts around the edge of the suds ponds, or even fencing to keep wildlife out and children?
Thanks, Bailey Williamson. So first of all, as was said within the deputation there, this is a dry pond and will only be filled with water during a storm event, so it's not regularly got water in it. On that basis, we don't usually condition fencing or safety apparatus around there, because like I say, it's only a danger during a storm event when you'd like to think that children aren't out playing. But if members were minded, it would be a competent condition that you could attach to the consent, saying that there was either a 1 metre fence, for example, around it. But like I said, there are implications as well, because this is likely to be adopted by Scottish Water in the future, and in order for Persimmon Homes to have it adopted by Scottish Water, they need to meet a set criteria. So it could cause Persimmon Homes implications in the future, which we'd have to be wary of. So on that basis, we consider as officers that what is proposed today is suffice and consistent with what we've done elsewhere in PKC.
Was it okay to come back, Convener?
Yes.
Yeah, so what you're saying, Sean, is that the adoptable standard for subs ponds, do they have some sort of a policy around about safety, water safety around it? I think my concern is, whilst these ponds may fill up very quickly during a storm period, they will also the water levels will drop very slowly. I take it, post storm. So I'm just trying to get my head around what would be Scottish Water's problem with putting some form of, I don't know, life belts around the edge of the pond, for example.
Yeah, so life belts aren't likely to be an issue for them. It would more be the fencing, because obviously they need to get in to maintain it. Their machinery and the likes needs to get in easily, so the fencing would need to meet their requirements. But I can't see an issue at all with asking for life belts or buoys or anything like that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Allen.
Thank you, convener. Just going back to my question that I asked the developer. With regards to contributions, I understand that there's a contribution within the structure here for £800,000, which is required to ensure there will be capacity within the adjacent Crieff Primary School. I'm just wondering, with 200 houses being built, do we have any idea how many children that might incorporate? Do we have capacity at the primary school? And there's nothing that I've read about the secondary school. Can you just put my mind at rest? Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Allen. Yes, so in terms of contributions, our contributions are calculated where a school is at capacity. They must provide contributions. So Crieff Primary School is one of those schools which has capacity concerns, hence why we're asking for the contribution. Now, the contribution rates are calculated per expected children per household, which works out here that we're expecting over £5,000 worth per house. So that gives the total of £810,748. So in answer to your question, in short, there are capacity concerns at Crieff Primary School, but the contributions that Persimmon Homes will be required to pay here will be suffice to address those concerns.
Do we have any concerns about capacity at the secondary school?
No, in terms of our adopted guidance, we only ask for contributions towards primary schools within a cluster. There are no concerns with Crieff High School.
Thank you. Apologies, I've just been locked out of my computer. Bailey.
Thank you. I had two questions. With the first one, paragraph 33 of the report refers to the fact that the intention is that the development zone green space will be privately factored. My question is actually one about policy. Looking at my inbox, there's often challenges with private factors, and it's often a more expensive route for the actual residents. If Perth and Kinross Council wished to, would it be a policy change in order to require that all developers seek council adoption, or is that not something that's within our power? So it's a policy question, not related necessarily to this application.
Yeah, so it's not something that's within our power today to force them to either have it adopted or to have a factor. But if the development is an adoptable standard, there's nothing to stop the council taking it on in the future, even if they start off with a factor. So we could take it on in the future if it's an adoptable standard, but there's nothing within our power today that could force Persimmon Homes either way.
Councillor Cuthbert, I'll let you ask your first question.
Thank you, Convener. Yeah, it's for transport planning. In the internal consultation, it was noted that the concept in principle design showed that there would be vehicle connectivity between this site and the adjacent Ogilvie home site and the sites to the south. But on the plan, it doesn't show vehicle access, it shows cycle access. So can I just confirm that we're now happy with just having cycle access?
Lachlan, can you take that one?
Yeah, thank you for the question. In relation to the connectivity between the sites, we will have vehicular access going between the Ogilvie home site and the Persimmon home site, and the condition relating to that is condition number 4, which is the delivery of the link in terms of linked streets between the two sites.
Thank you. Councillor Braun.
Yep, thanks, Convener. I'm looking on page 28, paragraph 28, under the heading about NHS. It says that advise that the Health and Social Care Partnership is under pressure to meet significant rise in standards. Later on in the report, page 37, on the health provision, the site, however, neither NHS nor Perth and Kinross Health and Social Care Partnership advised that there were pressures related to healthcare provision. So it seems to be an anomaly in two statements there. One is saying there is pressure and the other one says there isn't. If it's under pressure, should we not be looking at that? Sorry.
So it is under pressure. I would remind this committee that NHS aren't a statutory consultee. We only consult NHS at the request of members. NHS were consulted when the site was going through the LDP stage, and at that point there is no formal objection, hence why it was allocated. Now, within our supplementary guidance, going back to contributions, there is no requirement for a developer to contribute towards healthcare provision, so we can't insist upon that today. But what we can say is there is pressure there. NHS have identified the pressure, but we have allocated that site because NHS had no objection at that point, and there's nothing within our gift today to ask for a contribution towards healthcare. So hopefully that answers your question.
Can I come back on a supplementary?
Yes, go on.
Or you rather come back later on? It's up to you.
It's supplementary to this.
Okay, it's just that when the site was allocated, which is 2015, I think, looking at the numbers, we're now 9 years on, and we know the pressure's changed dramatically. Should we really be relying on information that's 9 years old? Should we not be looking at this? And if I may just time with that, Mr. Fogg might want to answer. I think policy 5B, I think it is, I looked it up, I think, allows for contributions, and it says, well, there's the pressures on infrastructure. We do have the option to look at this on a case-by-case basis, so there is a bit of flexibility in there, I think, but it's a question for both of you, I'm sorry, on this one.
Sean might want to come in afterwards, but I think as Sean was indicating, given that this is allocated or a part of a larger allocation for residential development provided for in the development plan, to which NHS Tayside did not object, and we now have, excuse me, planning permission in principle in place, and this is simply an approval of matters specified in conditions application coming forward. It's not now possible to say, wait a minute, we've found something else that we want to, I'm afraid. We've acknowledged some pressures, but we can't ask this developer to address them through this application.
Yeah, just one final thing as well. The site did go through the LDP2 process as well, which was 2019, so not quite 9 years old. But okie doke.
Thank you. Bailey.
Thank you, Convener. My question again is one of policy. We heard earlier that the developer has chosen not to employ the principle of pepper potting in this case. Am I correct in thinking that our guidance or policy defines that pepper potting is a desirable, therefore it's not within our powers to decline this on the basis of pepper potting not being achieved by the developer? Thank you.
Yeah, so we always encourage affordable housing to be spread out as much as possible across a site. But what I would draw your attention to here is this is just one part of the wider MU7 site. So within Ogilvie Homes as well, we already have 4 or 5 clusters of affordable housing, plus this one. So actually, when you look at the MU7 as a whole, that it is actually spread out across the site. Okay, in this proposal before us, it is just the northwestern corner, but we have to look at MU7 as a whole, and it is relatively spread out and meets our guidance in that respect. So we are quite content with what's proposed in terms of the layout of affordable housing, because when the scheme's all put together, it works quite well.
Thank you. Councillor Cuthbert, you've got 3 more questions. Are they all related? Well, do you mind if I go to Councillor Braun first and just do your 3 questions at the end? Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. It's just a bit of clarification with Ogilvie Homes and then the Persimmon ones. We've got 455 properties, and I think that completes the residential side. You're shaking your head now. I was going to ask what happens to the other side of it, the commercial side. What's happening there of MU7? But is there more residential to be built on this side?
Thanks, Councillor Braun. So yeah, the LDP2 has a top range capacity of 639 houses. Now the Ogilvie Homes site was 246 houses, and we've got 209 houses here. So that gives us 455 houses, which still means there's 184 left within that tolerance in LDP. Now that plan in front of you there, the site to the west of that will be the next phase of housing that's still to come forward. The employment land is to the east, kind of bunny hopping over the scheduled monument that's there. The employment land won't come into that housing number, but if this application is granted today, we've still got 184 units left within the LDP range.
Councillor Cuthbert.
Thank you, Convener. If I can just ask a supplementary to my previous question. In principle, Lachlan, are we talking about the cycle path being turned into a road? Is that what's being proposed by condition 4?
Yes, that is correct. So initially, what we'll be looking for is a cycle path connection going between the two sites, and then in the future, when the site to the west is built out, we potentially be looking for the loop road to be constructed at that time. The issue that we have is we've got the private driveway between the two sites in terms of accessing Broich House. So what we had kind of felt was that through discussion with the developer's agent, that in the future, when the site to the west is built out for the additional 184 houses, that would potentially mean that the driveway to Broich House would be closed up or connected into the housing development in a different way. So the opportunity to provide links between the residential houses in terms of a road access could be provided at that time. So in the interim, what we'd be looking for is the persimmon to build up to the northwest boundary of the site, and then provide a cycle path across Broich Drive at the moment. And Ogilvy are doing similar on their side. They're providing a vehicular access up to their boundary as well, so that in the future we can provide that vehicular link between the two sites.
Thank you for that. Okay, my second question, in the internal consultation, it was noted the streets with plots 89 to 111 has a number of vehicle accesses along its length, with there being a significant number. It is advised that a footway is provided along its length. Similarly for plots 127 to 131 and 150 to 156, where there are a series of driveways having a footway connecting them, is preferred. So our stated position was we preferred to see a footway. Looking at the plan, I can't see a footway being provided between plots 127 to 131 and 150 to 156. And the reason I'm asking this question is we have what you might call a shared space in a site in Kinross that's similar to this, and I get complaints from residents about it. So what is our position? Are we now comfortable with the fact there isn't pathways?
Lachlan?
Thank you. In terms of the revised layout that came in, we're comfortable with that now, particularly down the longer section on the screen there. There wasn't pedestrian facilities there. Persimmon have now revised the layout, and we're now comfortable with where the footway provision is and the shared surface areas as well.
Okay, final question for Lachlan. In the internal consultation, it mentioned a number of plots, the Warriston plots, and it said that the parking provision needed to be adjusted to comply with the National Roads Development Guide. Can you tell me whether that's been done or not?
Thank you. In relation to that, there was discussion with Persimmon regarding the parking provision on site and the visitor parking provision there. And with the revised design that came in, we are now satisfied with the level of car parking that's been provided on site.
Okay, thank you. My final question is, there's a pathway to be put along the side of Broich Road, I understand. Will this connect all the way along Broich Road from the site right into the town, or does it stop in places?
I'll answer. Yeah, I'll answer that. Sorry. In relation to the footway along Broich Road, it will be provided along the frontage of the Persimmon site, and it's also intended that it would be provided along the Ogilvy site. As I mentioned, there is Broich Drive in between at the moment, and there'll need to be further discussion on how the footway is provided between those 2 points. Notwithstanding that, what we're looking for is a toucan crossing to be provided from the Persimmon site to the northern side, which will provide access for walking and cycling, and then any informal pedestrian crossings with drop curbs provided at other points along the frontage of the site, so that there is that connectivity into the shared use on the northern side, which will provide linkages to the schools, Aldi, B&M, and then into the town centre as well.
Thank you. Billy McLaren.
Thank you. My question is actually a little bit sort of detailed about road markings. I've got within my ward, there is a large housing site where road markings are now causing, or lack of road markings are causing traffic issues and concerns with residents once they're settled into the site. So I would just like to draw officers' attention to the approach that's been taken on that site and some others where there are no road markings in the assumption that cars will politely drive through. And this is not happening. So I would just like to draw your attention and ask you to give that consideration. Thank you.
Thanks, Bailey McLaren. Yes, that's something we can give consideration through the RCC process, the Roads Construction Consent process. So that's something we'll look at.
Thank you. Any further questions? No further questions. Well, I'm going to put forward a motion for this one. And after having read the report and listened to officers and the committee, I support this application. The development will improve the infrastructure of the area by providing 2 access points onto Broig Road and a widening of Broig Road with pedestrian safety of a two-can crossing. After concerns expressed by Historic Environment Scotland about the protection of the Broig cursus, the developer has listened and now amended their landscape plan. There is also a good mix of house types, most importantly for me is the building of 52 affordable housing units. I support the application. Do I have a seconder? Bailey McLaren.
Yeah, thank you, convener. I'm satisfied with the application that's in front of us, and I am happy to second your motion and echo all your comments. Thank you.
No, convener. I was going to put the motion forward, but you beat me to it. So.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Can I ask for an amendment? Amendment, Councillor Cuthbert.
I was just picking up on Bailey Williamson's point about the suds pond. I would like incorporated a condition that there be provided life-saving equipment adjacent to the suds pond.
Yes, I'm happy to amend the motion to that. Yeah. Bailey McLaren.
Convener, yes, Councillor Cuthbert, I am, because again, I can cite an example within my ward where this is causing issues. So thank you.
Bailey Williamson.
Yeah, I think my internet was a bit slow, but essentially I think Councillor Cuthbert has beat me to it with my amendment. So I'm happy that everybody's accepted it.
Okay, thank you. And Councillor Reid, you have an amendment.
Yes, exactly the same lines, but I'd like to investigate the possibility of a fence, because I think Councillor Bailey Williamson's quite right. There will be water there and a fence could be investigated if possible.
Yes, if we worded the condition in a way that was prior to commencement of the development, the developer must submit a scheme to the council for written agreement which shows life-saving equipment and or a fence, and we could take the evidence there and justification and take that into consideration if members were in agreement.
Can I ask members if they have any comments on the report? Councillor Cuthbert.
Yeah, I was going to ask about the NHS situation. I think in a way we really need to look at this seriously to consider for future applications. What we're doing here is we're knowingly consenting a development that's going to put additional strain on a system that's already under strain. And I really think we need to be looking at that and thinking about how we deal with that in future with big, larger developments like this one.
Thank you for that. Councillor Braun.
Yeah, thanks, convener. But Councillor Cuthbert's got him a bit before me again on this one. So I'll just reiterate what he's saying. I think in this particular instance, we are aware there's a strain, and Mr. Pennington said there's another phase to go. I really do think we need to be on warning now as a responsible planning authority. We have been warned there's pressure, and it's not just here because we know it's everywhere. But I think we're starting to take note of this, and we can't wait for the next LDP 3 to come along. You know, the pressure's there, it needs to be assessed. Thank you.
Thank you. As there is no amendment, therefore planning permission is therefore granted in line with the report of handling, and with the added condition of the life-saving equipment. Thank you. Okay, thank you, everyone. We now move on to the next application. That's local applications now. And the first one up is for the change of use of agricultural buildings and land to business class 4, general industry class 5, storage and distribution class 6 in retrospect at land 250 metres southeast of Isla Villa, Grange, Errol. And to introduce the report is Mr. Williamson. Thank you.
Thank you, convener, and good morning, councillors. As stated, the first local item on the agenda today relates to the change of use of premises at Grange, Errol for the use of either Class 4 business, Class 5 general industrial or Class 6 storage and distribution purposes. The site is allocated in LDP2 as a mixed-use site and also within the settlement boundary of Grange and Errol Airfield. The application has been referred to committee in light of the receipt of 6 letters of objection having been received, referring to the matters raised in paragraph 24 of the report. In addition, a neutral comment was received from the Community Council, which flagged the potential need for conditions relating to the junction, road surfacing and operating hours if approved. I will now take members through a short presentation to detail the proposals further. Next slide, please. Here we see the location of the site, which lies to the south of the C484, which runs from Errol past the airfield towards Grange to the north. As can be noted from this aerial extract, the site is slightly isolated with fields in almost all directions, but the access road passes a number of residential properties leading to the site. Next slide, please. We now have a copy of the site plan, which shows the access arrangements in much more detail and how the dwellings are located adjacent to the first couple of bends in the access road, leading up to yard 74 and 75 as they are known at the bottom of the site. Next slide, please. This plan shows the elevations and floor plans of the respective yards 74 and 75 buildings. I will now take members through a series of photographs taken on my site visit on Wednesday the 29th of May. Next slide, please. This first photograph on the left shows the respective yard buildings with number 74 being occupied by Alpha Doors on the left and yard 75 on the right. This also shows the expanse of hard standing areas in front of each premise. Next slide, please. The next image shows the view from the second corner of the access road looking southwards towards the respective yards, while the image on the right is the view westwards, back past a couple of the residential properties. Next slide, please. These last photographs show the view northwards from the first bend on the access road looking back to the junction with the public road, while the photo on the right shows the junction looking southwards with residential property on the left-hand side. Next slide, please. Thank you, convener. That now concludes my presentation and I'll leave members with this site plan.
Thank you, Mr. Williamson. We do have deputation on this, so I'll hand over to the Vice Convener for the deputation procedure. Thank you.
Thank you, convener. We don't have an MD making one to make a deputation. However, we have Mr. Farmer who is willing to take questions from members. So if members like to populate the chat box, and I'll try and remember to call Mr. Farmer if needs to be. Councillor Braun. And Mr. Farmer, sorry, did it again. Call Mr. Farmer. Councillor Braun.
Thanks for asking, Brenda. So a very quick question. It's to do with the hours of operation. I think I can't remember, it's to 7 o'clock during the weekdays. 7 to 7. I just wonder on a Saturday, does it need to be 7 till 7? I know Sunday there's no working at all. And Saturday is reasonably a day of rest for a lot of people. Does it really need to be up to 7 o'clock at night? I mean, would it be not better, say 5 o'clock, something like that sort of time? Sorry.
Yeah, 5 o'clock would be quite acceptable. It's
We'll just give it a moment, Mr. Farmer. Thank you, Mr. Farmer. There appears to be no further questions. Thank you for your time. Convener, I'll hand back to yourself.
Thank you for that. Can I ask committee if they have any questions for officers? Councillor Harvey.
Okay, thank you, convener. It's just more clarification questions rather than questions. There's a couple of points. Sorry, just let me find them. You mentioned in the kind of subsection 39 about noisy machinery. What's your definition of noisy in that context in decibels?
Lynn, can you have that?
Well, it's any machinery that would give off noise that would disturb neighbours. So that's what noisy was classed as. It varies in the dB level, but I would say anything above 70 dB would be noisy.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Braun.
Thanks. I just want to clarify, officers. It talks about resurfacing part of the road, and I just want to, on the map we've got here, is that just between the two bends at the beginning? Is that what the part we're talking about for the amenity of the houses?
Thank you, Councillor Braun. Yes, indeed. The reference within condition number 10 refers to a scheme for road improvements, which would basically take it from the public road at the bottom left of the site past the initial houses. That's bend number 1, and then the second bend is just where it then straightens out, leading up to the two respective yards. By improving that section of the surfacing, would help to potentially reduce noise levels, dust levels, etc. to those residents.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's just for clarification. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Reid.
Thank you, convener. No, it's just a follow on from Councillor Braun. I mean, it's hard to imagine that the photographs shown were of a public highway. That road seems an incredibly poor standard. Hopefully it will be improved.
Certainly from this perspective, as I understand it, and I can bring in Lachlan to answer as well. Sorry. Carlin as well, that this isn't an adopted highway. This is a private road, but we'd be looking for improvements to it. But I can let Carlin come in as well.
Excuse me.
Thank you, convener. Yes, so we are satisfied with the protection of the public road via the condition for improvements to the junction at the public road in the interest of road safety. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Any further questions? No further questions. Can I ask for a motion? Councillor Braun.
Yeah, thanks, convener. I'm happy to put a motion to move the paper as is. The only slight thing I would ask is perhaps we could change the timings on the Saturday to 5 o'clock. So it's 7 till 5 on a Saturday, no work on a Sunday, 7 till 7 in the week, if we're happy with that. But that would be my motion to approve with that slight change.
Councillor Reid, you want to second?
Happy to second Councillor Braun's motion. Yep.
Thank you. Can I ask for an amendment? No amendments. Do committee have any comments on the report? No comments. Okay. Therefore, planning permission is therefore granted. Thank you very much. We ask, yeah. Right, Bailey, how did telephone back or not? Doesn't take part. Bailey Williamson, the next one.
Well, the next one, that's a good point.
Bailey Williamson. Right, okay. Okay, we'll have a 5-minute comfort break. Thank you. Okay, everyone, now move swiftly on to 522, which is the erection of a brewery tap room storage, formation of vehicle access, parking area, installation of EV charging point, formation of outdoor seating area, landscaping and associated works, land 50 metres south of Council Cottages, Ferry Road, Pitlochry. And to introduce the report is Mr. Williamson.
Thank you, convener. Second item on the agenda today relates to the erection of a brewery comprising a production facility together with a tap room serving food and drink, a small shop and an outdoor seating area on a small area of former woodland, last used as a construction compound, although with historical linkages as an auction mart off the Ferry Road, Pitlochry. While the site is allocated in LDP2 as open space, policy 14 of the LDP does allow for the development to take place in such areas where they're deemed to relate to a minor part of the site which would not affect its continued use as a recreational or amenity resource. In this instance, a combination of the site's previous use together with a consideration of the perceived economic benefits together with the linkages to the centre of a key Highland Perthshire town results in a positive recommendation within the report being considered today. The application has been referred to committee in light of the receipt of 6 letters of objection having been received, referring to the matters raised within paragraph 36 of the committee report. In particular, comments related to noise disturbance and nuisance, together with traffic impacts, design policy compliance and compatibility with neighbouring uses was also raised. In addition, 22 letters of support were also received, largely cross-referencing the wide-ranging economic benefits the proposal would bring. I will now take members through a short presentation to detail the proposals further. Next slide, please. Here we can see the location of the site, which lies to the south of the centre of Pitlochry, between Athol Road and the River Tummel. Next slide, please. We now have a slightly more zoomed in aerial extract, which shows the cleared nature of the land in question, directly above where it states site on the slide. To the west is the Balhousie Pitlochry Care Home, which is located at a lower level, with the Pitlochry Community Hospital and Athol Medical Centre also located to the west. In terms of residential property, immediately to the north of the site are 1 and 2 Burnside cottages, while the Bobbin Mill site, also known as Tombald Cottages, are to the east. Although a short distance to the northeast is the Ferry Road, a public car park, through which pedestrian access can also be obtained through to Pitlochry Railway Station and to the town centre. Next slide, please. We now have a copy of the site plan, which shows the arrangements in much more detail. This indicates that the proposed build would take up a significant proportion of the site, but sit within the bowl profile, which has been created through its previous yard use. The plan shows 3 car parking spaces to the site frontage, together with 1 accessible space and a delivery bay. Importantly, the red line boundary at the top right of the plan directly abuts but does not block the access to Tombald Cottages. The plan also shows the retention of 22 trees within the site, and to compensate for the loss of 12 trees in total, compensatory planting of 36 trees would take place. Next slide, please. Next, we see the elevations of the building. As outlined in the report, this single level proposal comprises 2 pitched-roof buildings linked by a low flat roof. The north-facing and east-facing elevations would comprise feature glazing, while the walls and roof would be finished with dark grey corrugated sheeting. Next slide, please. The drainage plan is now shown, and it shows the provision of cellular storage crates for surface water runoff. Filter trenches are also proposed to the adjacent slopes, and foul water shall be connected to the existing public sewer in Ferry Road. Next slide, please. This slide shows 2 artistic visualisations of the proposal, with the one on the left taken from the access to Tombald Cottages, also known as the Bobbin Mill site to the west, with the image on the right shown from the site access from Ferry Road. I'll now take members through a series of photographs taken on the case officer's site visit. Next slide, please. This first photograph shows the view into the site from Ferry Road. This illustrates the drop of level down into the site and the banking to the treed boundaries beyond. Next slide, please. This next image is from the edge of the site, looking southwards towards the 2-storey Balhousie care home below, the walls and roof of which can be seen. This also shows some of the trees which would require to be felled in the centre and left-hand edge. Next slide, please. These next photographs show the respective visibility splays to the east on the left, which also shows the retained access to Tombald Cottages, and on the west to the right, down towards the community hospital. Next slide, please. These last photographs nearest the residential properties at Burnside Cottages on the left-hand side, and the right-hand photo shows the view from the care home, Ferry Road turning head, looking back up towards the site beyond the care home car park. Next slide, please. Thank you, Convener. That now concludes my presentation, and I return to the site plan.
Thank you, Mr. Williamson. We have a deputation on this, so I'll now hand over to the Vice Convener for the deputation's procedures. Thank you.
Thank you, Convener. Can I call on Ms McPhee? Ms is an objector. Good morning, Ms McPhee. I'll help you. You're aware that you've got 10 minutes for your deputation, so whenever you're ready, I'll start the clock.
My voice? Right, okay then. I've been asked by residents, and having taken legal advice, to, you know, come here today and raise a number of points that we feel have been overlooked. Whether it makes any difference or not, I'm here to do that. Number 1, the National Plan and Framework 4.1 Basically, the emphasis on fairer and more inclusive planning, and the livability section specifically states that it will support local livability and improve community health. There's another pertinent point here. More people needed to be involved so that the built environment is welcoming and safe for everyone, including women, disabled people and ethnic minorities, and that includes us. We're not only ethnic minorities, there's women, there's pensioners and there's disabled people. And we feel that those have not been looked at all. National Plan and Framework 4 Policy 6B states clearly development will not be supported where they will result in any loss of ancient woodland, ancient and veteran trees, or adverse impact on their ecological condition. Now, that is ancient woodland. We were involved in the Woodland Plan 2009. Dr. Rick Worrell, a forestry consultant, and Dr. Doreen McIntyre, who was an ecological consultant, carried it out. Both came to the conclusion it was ancient woodland. So it was drawn to the Council's attention as far back as 2009. Furthermore, I've been instructed to point to the Fairer Scotland duty, the due regard, which is not a tick box exercise according to the Scottish Government. Serious consideration required by decision makers as soon as possible in the decision making process, and by decision makers at its adoption, as to whether there are opportunities to reduce inequalities of outcome. I don't see any active consideration or participation really that's taking place. We have been proactive in submitting objections, but beyond that, not even a local councillor has come to talk to us. The proposed applicant has never courteously come to talk to us. No one has. So basically, active consideration would require assessment of the decision, the needs of those directly affected by this decision under consideration, and in order to reach, a fair outcome. It's also an approach promoted by Scottish Government to policy making generally under the Community Empowerment Scotland Act 2015. Again, no evidence. As we've not been invited to participate and no duty bearer has sought to include us in participating or carried out any assessments, I would say that we've been excluded from the process. This has ramifications for the public sector equality duty, and I'll specifically look at the Quality Act 210 section 1491, the general duty to eliminate conduct banned by the Act, and this includes harassment, and we've had quite a bit of that. I've reported 2 incidents to police, and the police response was lacking, to say the least. This doesn't instill confidence that if that happens again with drunk people, and it is drunk people on both occasions, that there's going to be anything to prevent that. That, I would say, puts our safety and well-being at risk. And secondly, the public sector specific duty to meet the needs of people with protected characteristics, and here we're talking about sex, race, age and disability. Now, there's been no EHIQA or EHRQA carried out by the Council. I appreciate that planning may be looking simply in planning terms, but it's still part of the corporate body known as Perth and Kinross Council, and Perth and Kinross Council has an equality duty, which it's failed in a couple of other departments. This is a third one. For instance, an EHIQA would have discovered there's a recovering alcoholic living up there. It's not our family, but he is there. And a brewery next to it is not conducive to improving health, nor is it conducive for the other recovering alcoholics walking to the doctor's surgery next to it. And I do know that that has been an issue in other areas. The local development plan. The local development plan, specifically the policies 7A, suitable for the traffic that is likely to be generated. Well, it's difficult getting up and down that brain. If Bailey Mike Williamson hadn't actually excused himself, he could have said the problem he had going down it in December, which was when there was leaves and it was slippery. He slid all the way down, and we thought we were going to have to go down with a wheelbarrow and get him out of his car. Secondly, The 7AD, the use should be complement the ancillary use, which is a doctor's surgery, a hospital, an old folks home and residential area. I don't see how a brewery actually does that. There's a number of other LDP policies which I've outlined in my objection. So in summation, I think that we have been ignored, our needs have been ignored. There's been a lack of proportionality in ignoring many policies along the way to seek approval. And I've done what I've been instructed, both legally and by the other residents today, in bringing this serious defect to your attention before you seek to approve this. Thank you. I put it off.
Thank you, Ms McPhee. Are you willing to stay and take questions from members? Will we give a moment, and if members could populate the chat box, please. Councillor Braun.
Thanks, Vice Convener. Thank you for your deputation. Some points there, but I just wanted, you didn't clarify, and there's a question of, you talked about the residents there, and you talked about disability and women and security. You didn't explain a bit more about why you feel the brewery is going to affect your living standards. Sorry, before you start, I've got to kill this.
He told me to put it off. Yes, I think there's a number of issues. There's ageing ones, they're slow on their feet. There's COPD issues, which I sought advice from someone in York some time ago at the university who specialises in this, and he said there's a drip effect from the emissions from any brewery, and there's no way that you can prevent the air from becoming imbued with alcohol and ethanol. And the drip effect eventually attacks the central nervous system. Now, at least 4 residents are long-term sufferers of ME, including myself. I had it since 1988 at university, and that does have a deleterious effect on the central nervous system over a long period of time. It's not been assessed, and that's why I was hoping someone would come out prior to this and actually talk to us, but no one did. The other thing is the access coming down there. People are slow, COPD sufferers. There's long-term serious autoimmune conditions there, and I'm afraid that's a result of the horrendous conditions that we suffered since 1947 in the Tinker experiment accommodation, which you can easily find if you Google. And that's had a deleterious effect on general health and right across the card. There's also that stress, any sort of stress, and where there's been attacks on the site, and no one's been remotely interested, I have to say. There's also been triggers of various conditions which have been linked to the stress by the doctors at the time, who, for instance, offered me sleeping pills and various things, but because I have various allergies, didn't take them. So I think those effects have not been looked at. And then there's the speed at which some people go. One's now got a scooter with oxygen tanks and will be coming down that brae to go to the doctor's surgery. There's also, as I said, a recovering alcoholic. Well, I think putting a brewery next to you when you're trying to stay off drink and you've been off it for 4 years is not really conducive to seriously considering addiction or positive health outcomes. So, yep.
Convener Massey.
Thank you, and thank you for your presentation. You mentioned ancient woodland. Do you know if the woodland you're talking about is on the Scottish Ancient Woodland Inventory?
Well, I checked with the Environmental Rights Centre Scotland, and they seem to think it was. They said certainly it ought to be, because it was brought to the council's attention with the woodland plan that they commissioned in 2009, and if it hasn't been, that was neglectful. Oh, sorry.
Bailey McLaren.
Exhaustive, right, thank you. Yeah, this application that is in front of us today as a committee is for an expansion of a business. And there is a positive economics sitting within that, and they are trying to stay local to their area. You're mentioning that your inequalities have not been addressed for certain groups, women, ethnic minorities and disabled. Could you maybe expand on that and explain what you would expect and how they should be addressed, given that we as a committee have to evaluate what is in front of us. You made a remark about drunk within Pitlochry. Well, I'm presuming that was attributed to something out with this application as well. So could you just explain a bit deeper as to what you expect how you expect these equalities to be addressed? Thank you.
Well, since they were drawn to your attention by the various objections that we have, the protected characteristics, multiple, and therefore multiple vulnerabilities as a small community, which is a very marginalised community in Pitlochry, and no one comes to help. I would have expected officers dealing with this to have sought the advice of their Equalities Department and to have come out and done a comparable assessment, if not an EHIQA. That hasn't happened, so to me that's a dereliction of duty. And what I would expect is to take into account all the health needs, all the fears and stresses that could contribute to a decline in the current state of health, which isn't good anyway, and to have weighed that objectively with an open mind as per the Fairer Scotland duty, which it imposes in the due regard, against the proposed monetary gains which this will accrue, or hopefully accrue, or the chap wouldn't be doing it. I have no objection to that happening in Pitlochry, but I object to where it's going with no there's been no actual communication, we've been excluded, and I put that as a key indicator of a dereliction of equality duty exclusion. We've been excluded completely from, for instance, when I come down the road about 4 weeks ago and there's a chap with a theodolite, oh, we're going to extend the car park over there for the brewery. I'm like, well, that wasn't an original application that we commented upon when we put our objections in. We don't know what's going on. No one's kept us abreast. We did try and talk to our local councillor of choice, Bailey Mike Williamson, but all we ever got was don't know, don't know, don't know. Unfortunately, that wasn't helpful.
Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Vice Convener, and thank you for your presentation. Actually, my question was kind of Bailey McLaren's question as well, but I have another question for you. You mentioned in the response to your other question about alcohol and vapour in the air, as regards, sorry, I'm also reading here, as regards some of the release of vapours. I know in 73, 74 and 75 there's a variety of discussions about vapour control and emissions control and that type of thing. Which part of that don't you think would be good enough for this development?
As nothing's been shared with us and very limited, we're digitally excluded too. Can I highlight that point for the council? We've had no internet for quite a time, and I had to actually go to someone's computer and use it yesterday to send a letter to see if I was being allowed to come here today, at which I was assured I would be told by Friday or Monday morning by Democratic Services. As I haven't seen it, I don't know, but what I do say is you can't take away from, one thing doesn't cancel out the equality duty, and you can't cancel out the fact that ethanol has a deleterious effect on both the liver and conditions the central nervous system. And I've taken advice on that from someone who, actually is a specialist in that. I've also had someone in from America who's a doctor who's done 2 doctorates and this sort of thing. As she was in 3 weeks ago talking to us, so I could provide further evidence on this. But however, I thought I'd leave it to your own judgment, and that someone would actually probably contact us in terms of equality to discuss it. There's been no communications. I can't contact because we're digitally excluded as well. Despite paying Wi-Fi boxes, we get no internet more than 50% of the time. And I've had a council officer up who says that it's due to poor radio signal. He's walked the site. He said, you've got near 100% here, but it drops. Then you go in halfway, 48%, and right into the last chalet. Yeah. Yes. Well, that's what I'm saying. I haven't seen this because no one's shared it with me, and you're relying on internet, which I'm afraid is infallible where we are not infallible where we are. Thank you.
Ms McPhee, there appears to be no further questions. Thank you for your time. You're free to go. Can I now call on Mr. Lowe, who's on behalf of the applicant? Mr. Lowe, you've got 10 minutes for your deputation. I'll give you a prompt after 9 minutes. So in your own time.
Convener, committee, thank you very much for your time. Can you hear me okay? Yeah, thank you for your time today and for the opportunity to speak as well. So for those of you that don't know me, I'm Jack. I'm one of the co-owners of Wasted Degrees Brewing. So Pitlochry, this is where the business that my younger brother and I own together began in 2016. We grew up in the town. In fact, our parents still live in the same house we grew up in. They were both in education for Perth and Kinross for the vast majority of their careers. Indeed, Pitlochry is where my brother and I went to school. So it's where we grew up, playing the local pipe band, local football and rugby teams. It's where I'm growing up, or rather raising my own young family as well. So if you like, we have skin in the game here. This matters to me, not just from a business perspective, but indeed from a personal perspective as well, from the town and spending hopefully the rest of my days there too. For context, our business grew by 75% last year. We are bursting at the seams. I have the challenges that you want to have as a business. We're growing, we're doing so in the right way too, and I'd like to share some context as part of this application if you haven't already seen some of this information. So we are the Courier's Brewery of the Year this year for Tayside and Fife. We're the largest independent brewery in Perth and Kinross. And this has been built up over nearly 8 years now from nothing more than a 25-litre plastic bucket. Some of you may have dabbled in homebrew over the years. This is where this began. This was my younger brother's hobby. From a 25-litre plastic bucket with only organic investment, with very, very few exceptions. So reinvesting profits, salary sacrifice, which I would underline doubly so, and hard work. We now produce from 25 litres in a plastic bucket to 25,000 litres every month, generating economic value and other gains in various other forms that I'll touch on shortly for Perth and Kinross, for Scotland, the UK and beyond. One of the philosophies that underpins our business is from our grandparents who lived just along the road from where we're speaking today in Scone. They were both World War II veterans, and what underpins everything that we do is a philosophy that they imparted to us and reinforced over the years when we had them. Whatever we chose to do in life, they recommended and they pushed that we try and leave things in a better place than when we found them. So pick them up, do something valuable with them, do something that creates opportunity, creates betterment. And that's one of the reasons that we are, for example, a living wage employer. When we signed up to that scheme, we were one of less than 100 in Perth and Kinross to do so. We provide free period products at the brewery to alleviate rural period poverty. We provide free nappies for young family. We're currently, and we will in future with this site, have a renewable powers element to our business to keep our carbon footprint low. We use very little plastic, and we raise a great deal of money for charity as a business too. In fact, yesterday I just donated £539 split evenly between the British Red Cross and the Perth and Kinross Food Bank. My point here is this application is about more than just beer. It's about something more than that. There's no excuse in modern business for it not to be more. Local and national economic contribution is something that's very close to my heart. I'm a businessman, I would say that, but it's fundamental for what we're trying to do here and what we're trying to achieve for the local area, the local economy and beyond. We're creating and have done and will create more jobs associated with this site and the business. Business rates, we choose Perth and Kinross for our bins supply service. And nationally, we're contributing things like beer duty, national insurance, corporation tax. We are also a significant, not just manufacturing business in the area, but we are also an exporting business. We are creating value economically beyond Perth and Kinross. Indeed, it's quite gratifying when people come to the brewery and say, I saw your beer in a bar in Utrecht, and suddenly they're in Pitlochry, Blair Athol, etc. But my point here is what we do is done with integrity, with sincerity, and with sustainability at its core. It's done purposefully, not least being purposefully in line with the Scottish Government's ambition to be a great food nation. There's no reason not for business to be like this, as I say. Now, the design of what's been put forward to you today in our application has been submitted with a great deal of detail, or a great deal of consideration, indeed with a pre-planning consultation in May last year with Perth and Kinross Council, and with a comprehensive list of surveys to provide a well-informed design to ensure that what we're doing is done right by the community, by the business, for the betterment, as I say, of the local area. Now, the surveys show beneficial action on ecology to protect, to stabilise and to enhance ecology. There's been reference made today to do with trees. We do not align with the point on ancient woodland, nor does our qualified ecologist. We are, yes, removing some trees. A good number of them have a contagious fungus. So back to my point about protecting, stabilising, enhancing, we're removing, we are replacing with greater numbers. Indeed, some of the trees that we're replanting and replacing the diseased or trees that are removed are being planted at Pitlochry High School's nursery to create an orchard for the children. Other elements, for example, low to negligible noise and odour impact, as you'll again see from, these are surveys provided by highly qualified, accredited scientists, engineers, architects, experts in specific fields. We have provided qualified information from these people to help support this, but equally and very crucially to help inform the design of what we're trying to create here, to do right by the local area and to do right as a business. Low traffic impact, indeed, this site is nearby, it's been referenced today, the Ferry Road car parks in Pitlochry, which the council's own commissioned survey data shows is the least used car park in Pitlochry. And although a tertiary point, I think it's worth noting that naturally, of course, we have our own parking, including disabled parking at the brewery, EV charging, bike parking, etc. If more people are parking in the council's car park, there's more revenue generated. There are additional benefits to us being at this site. And although not necessary, based on the recommendations from our ecologist, we've also decided to incorporate bat, bird and red squirrel boxes on the building and in the site to again protect, stabilise, enhance the local ecology. And this is a site with a long history of industrial use. This is in a part of Pitlochry that was the industrial hub of the town well into the 20th century. So we feel it's a good site for us to be in. We're in an area that is surrounded on three sides by raised ground and by trees. Now, to touch on the objections that we've received, I think it's important to note that we understand that change might be unsettling. Change isn't necessarily something that everybody always favours. It's why we reached out proactively to our notifiable neighbours in the post rather than digitally. We also reached out through local press and likewise published on social media to make sure there was visibility and a level of understanding of what we're looking to achieve here. We felt that the content of some of the objections that we received, bearing in mind 5 of the 6, if I remember correctly, were virtually copy and paste of each other, that they bore little relevance to our development. I think, in my opinion at least, we've heard some of that today. Indeed, most of the content was conjecture and, in our view, misguided with a lack of science or facts behind the claims being made. And there was a notable disregard, as I say, to the scientists, engineers, etc., that we've appointed to try and do what's right by the community here. So in summary, we're looking to enhance, to bring a significant manufacturing business to Pitlochry. We want to stay in Perth and Kinross. I want to build in my hometown. We're an export business. We're creating jobs, supporting increasingly local supply chains. In fact, we're now taking our barley from 5 miles from where this building is to brew our beer. And in approving this application, I think it's an enablement of all of the above to retain that and to grow that economic value in Perth and Kinross, regionally and with national implications too. So that's all I have to say at this point in time, and I thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you for your deputation, Mr. Lowe. We have questions in already, so we'll go straight to them if you're willing to take questions from members. Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Vice Convener, and thank you, Mr. Lowe, for your presentation. The first question really is with regards to one of the objections that was made. I know a bit about whisky brewing and that there's ethanol there and it can be regarded as the angel's share. Can you explain a wee bit about beer brewing and what that's going to produce?
Certainly, yes, and thank you for the question. I myself, I've previously worked in the whisky industry as well, so I have an appreciation for the science. I'm not a scientist myself. So ethanol in whisky production, you referenced the angel's share. When a whisky barrel is filled with new make spirit from the still, over time, some of that ethanol makes its way through the timber of the cask or the barrel, if you like, into the atmosphere. That's a scientific process that happens over time. It's not in the production process per se within the stills. It's post that in warehousing. Now, with beer production, yes, we are likewise producing ethanol. That's the alcohol component within alcoholic beverages. Now, there are no ethanol emissions created in the production of beer, 0. There is no angel share component. We're not aging things in barrels that breathe, if you like. The emissions, and indeed one of the reasons we commissioned quite a serious odour and air impact assessment was to prove that that was indeed the case, that there are no emissions of that nature. We are certainly not emitting ethanol into the atmosphere. Indeed, ethanol is what we sell and what we want to contain and package, and indeed export as we do to 13 countries now. So I fully and outright reject the comment that was made in the objections that we're going to be replacing oxygen in the local air supply with ethanol. I think that's scientifically nonsensical.
Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Vice Convener. Actually, Councillor Allen's asked my question precisely. I did have one other question for askers now. This is an expansion of your business. How many new jobs or full-time, part-time jobs are you going to create with this?
So as we shared in our application, there's an immediate creation of 2.5 to roughly 3 full-time positions in the business. As we progress and as we grow, the growth of the business is really in 2 areas with regards to human resource. That's in, first of all, the venue component of the business, so the bar, the food, so in hospitality jobs. Likewise, and I think crucially as well, thinking about local economy and the diversifying of job opportunities locally in Pitlochry, which, let's face it, is not exclusively, but very much predominantly a tourist town. We're creating skilled employment in our business as well in the production side of the business. So we are creating highly skilled jobs with opportunities to leverage and to give back, if you will, via the likes of apprenticeships, via the likes of work experience. As a side point to that, in terms of showing the next generation the art of the possible in terms of local opportunity. My brother and I, as I mentioned, went to Pitlochry Primary and High School, and likewise Bradalbin Academy in Aberfeldy later. We've returned to both of those schools in the last 6 to 9 months to present to the pupils there of various different ages. This isn't just about alcohol, this is business, this is skill sharing. This is showing what you can do in your hometown. You don't necessarily need to leave. So there's wider ranging benefits, I believe, certainly in the employment, both upfront in the immediacy of the opening of the business and then the medium and long term.
Okay, thanks very much.
Councillor Brown.
Thanks for asking me. Thank you for your deputation. I'm coming to the points about the hours of operation here. The operational hours for the site, which I presume is the brewery, is 8 till 4, but the tap room is 11 till 10 o'clock at night. My thoughts would be that, you know, you open up for people to come and see the brewery process and get a tour of the site and end up with a quick bevy at the end to taste the sample. But it seems you're running beyond that. So is the tap room effectively going to be a public house then? Is that the idea of it, to run it into night time? And that's my first question.
So the short answer is indeed yes. So then this is perhaps a semantics terminology, tap room, bar, food, yes. With regards to licensing objectives, of course, that's a core part to our business, being an alcohol producer and indeed retailer. You know, we are duty bound to make sure that's done well and done right. Those elements in terms of the hours of operation, yes, indeed, 8 till 4 is our production hours, typically Monday to Friday. The venue component, the bar, if you will, from 11 o'clock, that's the earliest indeed that you can typically start with on sales. And then onwards into the evening. Now, we've purposefully designed and chosen, you know, indeed with the noise impact assessment to inform this, was how do we manage noise as a business? It's a material outcome licensing objective likewise, so there's more than just a planning element for us here. So it's something we want to manage. We view the site much like almost a distillery visitor experience. You have production and indeed you have a place to be, a place to go to, a reason to visit. So yes, whilst we will be indeed serving later into the evening, as we do indeed at our current site in Blair Athol as well, we feel that the decisions made in design and management of the building mitigate any potential impact of, you know, noise creation, etc. later on in the evening.
Bailey McLaren.
Thank you. Yeah, my question is, you stated at the beginning of your deputation that your business had grown by 78% last year. That's quite a phenomenal growth. That's commendable, and I commend you getting to this point from zero. Will this site, if business continues to grow like at a strong rate, will the site be able to accommodate that growth? And equally, I'm also making a presumption that there was very little option for other sites within your area of choice, so you were chose this site really because it was probably the only one available.
Just to touch on that last point first, probably the quickest one to respond on. We had circa 3 sites that were open to us that we considered. This one we felt was the most optimal for reasons that there's plenty of detail in the pack, but ultimately to have everything on a single site operation. Now, the sort of supplementary part to that, as well as potentially why Pitlochry, why not continue to grow in Blair Athol? We wanted an area with a greater population density, with less seasonality, as we currently experience in Blair Athol. For instance, just to paint the picture, we operate our venues, or our bar and food offering in our current site in Blair Athol for 28 Saturdays of the year, so 6 months of the year. It's a very peaks and troughs kind of tourist scenario, as you might imagine. Pitlochry is much less of that, so that's the rationale on that site selection, particularly. On the point of growth, so my brother and I are wholly aligned on the fact that we want to grow our business to a certain point. We don't want this to be a corporate behemoth. I've lived that life and I'm not looking for that in my own business. So I've almost exclusively worked for extremely large stock market listed companies, for example, in most of my career. We don't want that for wasted degrees. We think it would become something else were it to get much bigger. and hence why we very deliberately designed the site to accommodate ultimately production levels that are circa 4 times what we currently produce in terms of liquid output, in terms of beer. So that's a very deliberate thing. We want, quite purposefully, and I'm sure some people with their business hats on would have an allergic reaction to this, we want to constrain the business growth. We want to plateau by design at a certain level. So that's been something that's informed our decision making on the site location and likewise the design of the site itself.
Convener Massey.
Thank you, and thank you for your presentation. I would like to, it was mentioned by Ms McPhee about the road and traffic. How are you going to manage deliveries of, I mean, I assume that big lorries come to take your stock away. So how are you going to manage this?
Yeah, thank you for the question. It's been something that we've worked very closely with transport planning on to quite purposefully design the right solution for the site and indeed for Ferry Road. We must, of course, be conscious of the healthcare settings nearby, other residential settings likewise. On deliveries specifically into the brewery and vehicular access, we're almost exclusively served by and forgive me, I forget the correct terminology, but 9.5 ton trucks, flatbed trucks with tail lifts, rather than articulated lorries, for example. And the deliveries are either the goods in parking bay, which you'll see on the upper left portion of the site plan that's on screen at the moment. That's been specifically designed to not just accommodate that class of vehicle, but have room to spare. I think rightly the council pointed out in consultation that we of course have to provision for the fact that I want my business to be there in perpetuity, but that site should be usable for potential future uses. So we've over provisioned in terms of that delivery bay, if you will, and crucially to make sure that those vehicles are off the road. We're not here to cause obstruction. Noted as well, likewise, conditions on the construction management plan to be able to make sure that we're doing that appropriately, sympathetically. So it's not just about goods vehicles for us, there's that holistic view. And of course, likewise, why we've provided other car parking spaces to limit the burden on the road infrastructure. I hope that answers your question. Thank you.
Councillor Allen, your second question.
Thank you, Vice Convener. Mr. Lowe, in your plan, I see 3 parking spaces and one of them is disabled. You've spoken about expansion of jobs to full-time jobs and hopefully expansion beyond that. And I'm also reading that you might have upwards of 90 people visiting at any one time. And given that people like to park as close as they can and sometimes don't want to walk the length of themselves, can you give me an understanding of how you're going to manage this?
Certainly, yeah. Thank you for your question. So a couple of elements to this, and I don't want this to sound too frank, not at all, but I think matter of fact, based on what we're producing, of course, we're not expecting everybody to be driving to us, considering that part of the idea is the consumption of alcohol, a licensed product. Likewise, we are not expecting that everyone that's coming to visit us is exclusively visiting the Lochray specifically for us. We're expecting the matrix of transport options to come into play to alleviate burden on the road generally, and not least our own car parking facilities. So, our isochrone insights, for example, in our transport statement show that we are, very well connected to existing public transport options, be that local and national bus services, trains, likewise. And crucially, back to a point I made a few minutes ago around the immediate public car park that's available on the same road that is the least used in Pitlochry. For us, the importance is on communication, which is perhaps your point around how we make sure that we're not lacking an available car parking space, how we communicate that. Now, based on our experience of our existing business, which should be pointed out as a considerably more rural and less accessible option. Indeed, our current brewery does not have a footpath to it. We actually find that there are very limited vehicle users coming to us anyway. So there's a kind of all-encompassing view of our actual experience to date, and what we're expecting and what we understand of the transport infrastructure in Pitlochry that's informed the number of parking spaces we've made available. Likewise, if it's not been noted elsewhere, we've provisioned for considerable bicycle parking at the brewery to promote active travel options, so beyond public transport, to ensure that we can leverage National Cycle Route 7 likewise. We are a very low carbon business. I am not in the business of creating more car journeys. So the onus is on us to communicate that effectively, also to ultimately leverage the population that's visiting Pitlochry, or indeed that's resident in Pitlochry, to travel to us either by public transport or indeed on foot or other active travel modes.
Are you going to have your own liveried vans? And if so, where are they going to be?
Great question. The short answer is yes, we actually have one at the moment. Now the liveried van is something that is typically parked in my own house, which is less than a mile away from the brewery. I fully intend on walking to work in future. It's probably good for the health, get the step count up. The van, when not parked at the brewery, the idea is that one of the jobs that's being created is ultimately for a initially near and then ultimately 1.0 full-time equivalent employee to be out there on the roads delivering our product. So that goods in, perhaps is what you're alluding to, that goods in space, is it available when it needs to be for deliveries to be made with other vehicles? The short answer is indeed yes. We are, for context, you mentioned vans in the plural. We are not looking to add to our fleet of vehicles, and I'll give you a couple of reasons as to why I stand behind that. One being our low carbon credentials. I don't necessarily want my beer to travel further than it needs to. Our one existing light goods vehicle, light commercial vehicle, is sufficient to enable the growth up to that fourfold increase in that production output. And the reason that's the case is that with the venue component of this new build, we are expecting and indeed targeting to sell upwards of 70% of the liquid of the volume of beer that we produce on site. So we're not necessarily adding additional requirements for courier services, our own vans, etc., in the makeup of how we distribute the product, because selfishly we want to sell most of it ourselves in-house, so to speak.
Councillor Braun.
Thanks, Vice Convener. I'm following on from Councillor Allen's question here, and I'm convinced at the moment about the parking situation. You've said the tap room is effectively a public house, what we're running, a venue, a bar, whatever. And I didn't realise there was a car park in Ferry Road either, so I didn't know. But people would tend to drive. They tend to drive to pubs to visit. I'm not a great supporter of this concept that if you build less car parking spaces, less people will drive somewhere. I think that's a flawed argument. I'm a bit concerned about controlling the parking near the pub itself. When we get into the evening time, people start, if they've only got two spaces at the front, they're going to start parking in the road, possibly. There's no restrictions of parking on the road. That concerns me a little bit because we've got an ambulance depot within the health area. And I'm just wondering what you think you could do to try and convince people that they've got to park in the car park. Would it be better perhaps just to have 3 disabled spaces at the front, so they've got to park somewhere else? That concerns me. You're running a place into the evening. People have got to go home. A lot of people go to pubs. They go drive there. They have a drink. And they go home. So I'm concerned about this parking restricting the access for ambulances and whatever.
Thank you for the question. Yeah, and certainly not in my best interest, certainly to make sure that we haven't got restrictions on the road caused by people attempting to park at the brewery. Now, you make an interesting point of why not just make them all disabled spaces and actively discourage that parking. To that point, I might sort of suggest or counter by saying, if indeed that was the desire of the committee to restrict things in that manner, I would suggest that those parking spaces could, for example, be made exclusively and communicated as such for staff parking purposes. Likewise, and again, as I've mentioned with your colleague's question, the onus is on us to be able to communicate that through appropriate signage with the right communication journey from the point of indeed arriving at the brewery to walking into the brewery to make sure that that's reinforced. We received a neutral comment indeed from the nearby healthcare setting saying, of course, they don't want us to use their parking spaces either. So the onus is very much on us to communicate that. Now, we are predominantly a digital brand in terms of our communications. Indeed, we've got a significant e-commerce portion to the business. So from the start of that customer journey and the development of that relationship, we need to communicate that across all channels, and it needs to be front of mind. So, you know, for example, in our current brewery taproom public bar, we list, and indeed we've become an affiliate with various public transport ticketing sites to say there are, depending on your worldview, there are better ways of moving yourself to the bar, to the brewery. So I take your point on board, and I would say yes, if indeed we feel that those parking spaces need to be communicated differently, I think a staff parking, if you like, signage might be an appropriate option to take. I certainly wouldn't want to lose those parking spaces for general use. That's my opinion. Having said that, of course, there is revenue opportunity for Perth and Kinross Council if more people use their parking just up the road, less than a 30-second walk from the brewery.
I've got another question, but just to supplement on that one, it's just an idea came to my head. And you can have one of those spaces as a disabled parking space and the other two for car charging. Would that be acceptable as an idea?
The short answer is very much yes. It's indeed why we're fitting electrical vehicle charging points, which you'll see on the plan. Indeed, those will be directly powered from the solar power that we're going to install onto the building. The power makeup of the overall building is in discussion. We've also got fairly advanced conversations, for example, in the likes of hydrogen power, to have a really clean source of energy, and again, produce on site.
So that wasn't my second question. Sorry, I was going to be the but just I was just picking up on what the objectors picked up on was that they were concerned about the security, and what the lady mentioned, one instance of drunkenness in the area. I know it comes under a different parameter, which is the licensing board, but presumably you've got to get the appropriate license. You'll be monitoring this sort of thing, that there isn't drunkenness on site, and people that you're aware of the security concerns that of residents have around you.
Yes, very much aware. It is a fundamental licensing objective to make sure that that's appropriately controlled. We're dealing with a controlled substance. We're in that business, and you know we're governed not just by those licensing objectives, but likewise by HMRC, not simply as a retailer, but also as a producer. So, with prior experience, actual experience in our current site, you know we're actively managing that. Likewise. In a more challenging setting as well, as I've mentioned previously. Both my brother and I, as the sole owners of the business, are personal license holders, so we are qualified to understand, to identify, to manage those appropriately. Thank you.
Mr. Lowe, there's no further questions, so you're free to go. Convener, there's no further deputations, so I'll hand back to yourself.
Thank you. Can I ask the members if they have any questions for officers? Bailey.
Thank you, Convener, and also thank you to both of the deputations for making their points. Sections of the report, sections 73 through to 75, as my colleague pointed out, cover the environmental health aspects of the emissions and odours from the building. My question for officers is, how can we be reassured that those measures that are being conditioned will indeed result in a good experience for the neighbours? Is there an established case history, for example, of this scale of brewery operating in an urban setting, applying this set of mitigations, and then neighbours being happy with the odour and the emissions that result? Thank you.
Lynn, can you take that?
Yep. You'll notice also that we have further conditions on the application for justified complaints. So if any of the residents were noticing odour in the area coming from the distillery, then they can complain into planning enforcement, and we would go out and we would assess the situation, and they would also have to get a further odour assessment carried out. I hope that answers your question.
He's going to follow up, Lynn.
Just a short follow-up about the specific point about, is there a case history of other similar scales of breweries applying this level of mitigation and then the neighbours being happy? Is that something that's been looked into? Thank you.
Well, there is other small breweries within Perth and Kinross area, and as far as I know, we haven't had any complaints from any of them so far. Excuse me.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Braun.
Thanks, Convener. It comes back to this question about parking again, and the fact obviously there's an ambulance station nearby. Jack, I think his name was, said that he'd be happy to consider one of the parking spaces for disabled, the other two for charging points only. Could we condition that? That's the first point. And the other point is probably a question for Lachlan, and that is, as a precautionary measure, could the road be yellow lined to stop parking in any shape or form? Obviously, with the council car park only 30 seconds away, I wonder if that could be done for the benefit of the precautionary measures for the health centre.
So first of all, thank you, Councillor Braun. Yeah, from the perspective of the parking changes to the number of spaces, etc., we could obviously liaise and hear from Lachlan in due course as to whether that's an acceptable solution. Whether it would be a specific requirement of us to demand that they have electrical vehicle charging points, probably not. Obviously, it is desirable at this day and age that we are providing for such opportunities, but obviously that is also covered through the parallel building warrant process. I think we've heard on that topic previously, but certainly something that we could look at, and if it's something that they're willing to put in and it's there and available, then so be it. In respect of the yellow lines and the requirement to undertake those, I'll let Lachlan answer on that point.
Thanks, Paul. I'll take the first point in relation to the lining along Ferry Road. That's something that we could liaise with the traffic and network team regarding that, and whether that's something that could be implemented along there. It's likely there would need to be a traffic regulation order for those works, but that's something that we could certainly progress if that's something that you wanted looked at. In relation to the car parking on site, I mean, if they're looking to change that slightly in terms of potentially 1 disabled bay and 2 EV charge points, that would be fine from my perspective as well. There, as Jack said, there is the council car park adjacent to the site that's quite close by and does have availability from the studies that Perth and Kinross Council has undertaken. So it's likely that the demand for the site would fit comfortably within the car parking that is available within Pitlochry.
Thank you. You want to come back?
Just a supplementary, can we then condition to have those 2 spaces as electrical charging points only? I'm trying to discourage parking outside the site, but if not, then we can't. Fine.
I understand your quest, Councillor Braun. I think you're constrained by the planning conditions circular, and this, it sounds to me, falls within the category of desirable as opposed to necessary. And to be a competent planning condition, it has to be shown to be necessary. I think you've heard an indication that the applicant is willing to consider that. I think it probably has to be left on the basis that they will consider it, but I don't think it could be a mandatory imposition this morning.
Thank you. I see no further questions. Can I ask for a motion? Motion from Councillor Harvey.
Yeah, thank you, Convener. I would just like to propose a motion to accept the application as is. This is a very good development, I think, for Pitlochry, the jobs and other activities that will come out of it, and kind of moves away from the tourism sector. So I'm prepared to propose a motion as is. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Allen, you wish to second?
Happy to second. Thank you.
Do we have any amendment? Again, there is no amendment. Can I ask if anyone has any comments on the report? Bailey McLaren.
Yeah, I'd just like to thank the officers. I would say that kind of echoing, this is really positive for the local economics of Highland Perthshire, and it's heartening to see that this has been brought in front of us for approval and all the necessary diligence has really been attended to very well. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. In line with it, the planning permission is therefore granted. Thank you. Okay, now it's 11:34. We've got 2 applications ahead of us. Do we want to take a break now, which is a short break, and then do the 2 applications, or do you want to just continue and get it finished? No, they can wait. You got a short break. 10 minutes. Okay, then. 10 minutes. Can you call in Bailey Williamson? Thank you. Okay, folks. Right, Bailey Williamson's back. Yeah. Okay, Councillor Reid, are you there?
I'm here.
Okay, cheers. Okay, we'll move on to the next local application, and that's for part change of use and alterations to a building to form 10 short-term let accommodation units at 54 to 56 High Street, Kinross. And to speak to the report is Mr. Williamson. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Convener. The third local item on the agenda today relates to the part change of use of the first and second floors of space above Green Supermarket on the High Street of Kinross. The intention is to subdivide the space to create a total of 10 short-term let accommodation units in this town and neighbourhood centre site. This application has been referred to committee in light of the receipt of 7 letters of objection having been received, including 1 from Kinross Community Council. The matters raised are referred to in paragraph 27 of the report, although these largely relate to traffic and parking, loss of privacy and overlooking, drainage, density of units, and management of the units going forward. I'll now take members through a short presentation to detail the proposals. Next slide, please. Here we can see the location of the site, which lies at the junction of Station Road to the north and High Street to the east. The latter is characterised by a mix of commercial units, generally at ground floor levels, while the former has a dental surgery near the High Street junction and residential properties as you travel westwards. To the south of the site are the rear gardens of residential properties on Piper Row and Swans Acre. Next slide, please. We now have a copy of the location and site plan, which shows the general location in more detail and the scale of the existing building in relation to the more traditional layout of the vicinity. Next slide, please. Just waiting for the next slide. There it is. Next, we see the site plan, which shows the provision of 8 one-bedroom units on the first floor, with a further 2 one-bedroom units on the second floor within the attic space. They would range from 21 to 34 square metres in size, and each would have ensuite facilities and a small kitchenette. The first floor would also include a central area comprising communal facilities in the form of a lounge. The site plan also indicates the 10 spaces that would be reserved for the proposed accommodations use. In order to clarify a point made by one of the objectors, the greyed out area on the first floor plan relates to a presently vacated Chinese restaurant number 52 High Street, which has its own separate access from High Street. Next slide, please. We now look at the proposed elevations. The east elevation would remain unchanged, while the north elevation would see 2 new windows at first floor level and a new door at ground floor to provide access to the accommodation. To the rear, a total of 4 new windows would be installed or created at first floor level. As noted in section 42 of the report, it's considered that the relationship adjacent to residential property is satisfactory, albeit largely due to the existence of existing trees and a high wall bounding the site. However, should members have concerns in this regard, then it would be possible to seek an amendment via condition relating to the provision of either high-level windows or single-aspect window solutions to restrict potential overlooking if they consider that necessary. I would also wish to point out that paragraph 43 also incorrectly states that windows would be added to the east and north elevations, whereas it should have stated west and north. I will now take members through a series of photographs taken on my site visit last Wednesday, 29th of May. Next slide, please. These first images show the frontage of the property on High Street with Green Supermarket at ground floor and the first floor aspects considered as part of this proposal within the white rendered section and the attic space above it. The aforementioned vacated Chinese restaurant is in the first floor level on the right-hand side above the supermarket entrance. The right-hand image shows the largely blank elevation towards the car park and Station Road. Next slide, please. The next slide shows the west elevation on the left-hand side and the tree cover and high wall beyond the storage lockers. The right-hand photo shows the view westwards from the western gable looking back towards Station Road and the residential properties beyond. Next slide, please. This last slide shows the view southwards from the car park towards the rear garden of properties on Piper Row and Swansacre. On the left, while on the right-hand side, is the view from the southwest corner of the car park back northeastwards towards the application building at the junction of Station Road and High Street. Next slide, please. Thank you, Convener. That now concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Williamson. Can I ask if the committee have any questions for the Jeez, let's put my teeth back in. Any questions for officers? Thank you. Bailey.
Thank you, Convener. The application is titled as an application for 10 short-term let units, and it's assessed on that basis. I note, however, that there is a communal area that is shared between the occupants of the units, and also that there is no space for any staff, whether that would be cleaning staff or staff that might supervise the residents and ensure there's no issues with noise or antisocial behaviour. So my question, therefore, is, at what stage would we consider this to actually be an unstaffed hotel as opposed to a cluster of short-term lets? And if we did classify it as a unstaffed hotel, would the appraisal still be the same, and would we still be looking at a recommendation to approve today? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bailey. First and foremost, we have to assess the application on the basis as it's been submitted. So obviously they have applied for a short-term let accommodation units. We are considering it on that basis. Obviously, we have our parallel licensing requirements for short-term lets. So obviously the management, operation of that, potential antisocial behaviour, etc. would ultimately be controlled through that process. We aren't looking upon it as a hotel per se. Obviously, short-term let accommodation is separate and distinct. So we are considering it on that basis and not as anything else.
Councillor Cuthbert, I'll take the first question.
Thank you, Convener. It's for transport planning. In principle, this application takes 10 parking spaces in Kinross. The parking in Kinross is extremely tight, and it's getting increasingly difficult to park there. So I'm just wondering, are we comfortable with the fact we're losing 10 parking spaces? Is it something we can do something about?
Lachlan, can you answer that?
Yep. Thank you for the question. In relation to the private car park that's operated by Greens, what I would hope is that whilst they've shown 10 bays being allocated for the short-term lets, it's unlikely that they would be occupied the whole time that someone is there. So potentially, if someone was staying there overnight, they might arrive at 5 o'clock and leave by, say, 9 o'clock in the morning, which would then leave those bays available for general members of the public to use whilst visiting Greens throughout the rest of the day.
Thank you. Bailey Williamson.
Thank you, Convener. My question is about, whilst I accept the report's recommendation that the 10 units are not going to impact significantly on the housing within Kinross, I'm just concerned, has there been a housing needs analysis done within Kinross to back up the fact that we're maybe losing these properties? And secondly, it's around about the developer contribution. If this was 10 houses, we would be anticipating, I would expect a developer contribution, and short-term lets seem to bypass that. Is that something that we need to try and resolve as a council, or is that more does that lie with the Scottish Government perhaps?
Thank you, Bailey Williamson. First of all, obviously, from the perspective of loss of housing, etc., this is storage space above an existing supermarket, so it's not going to impinge on any housing supply at present. And if anything, it could have the potential to actually free up other residential accommodation that is otherwise used for people on a short-term basis. So it would be providing specifically for the need of small units. From the perspective of developer obligations, no, there's no developer obligations for short-term let units. Obviously, if a proposal ever came forward for mainstream residential or flatted use, then we would obviously evaluate that at that time.
Thank you. Bailey McLaren.
Thank you. My concern is surrounding 10 one-bed units. There's really no imagination here in the mix of availability for different types of demand or users. This doesn't accommodate families. And, you know, it's a maximising this building, clearly. So is this something we can be considering to reduce the number of units? I just feel it's kind of just shutting out an awful lot of potential customers here, and you know, and then as Bailey Williams suggesting, housing. Why is this not flats then for affordable flats? Thank you.
First and foremost, obviously, the applicant is the one who's come forward with the proposal for 10 units. Again, we have to assess that on its own merits. We within planning consider that the scale of development and density is acceptable as we see it. Obviously, the applicant may have undertaken their own due diligence in considering the market that they are looking to take advantage of. Again, we have to just accept what is being tabled. We have nothing within policy that would look for a mix or range of scale or types that we would have, such as with developments over 20 units if it was residential, but these aren't residential units. So we are limited with our considerations on them.
Councillor Cuthbert, I'll come back to you for your other two questions.
Thank you, Convener. My principal concern, I think you touched on it in your introduction, is the overlooking. The property, the supermarket sits on a slight hill, and it looks straight down into Swansacre and Piper Road, and the residents there are very concerned that you're going to put windows in on the western elevation, and they're going to look straight down into the bedrooms and other rooms in the properties. So the first question was, has a test been done? Has someone actually gone and measured to make sure that that's not impinging on the rules about overlooking?
Thank you, Councillor Cuthbert. When it comes to the rules in respect of overlooking, we would generally be looking to have kind of 18-metre window-to-window distances. In this instance, we're looking at about 20 metres from the kind of nearest window to those within the property on Swansacre that is almost a kind of partial direct line of sight. So window to window is fine. From the perspective of window to garden ground, yes, I did allude to the fact that there would be some potential overlooking to within the garden ground. There are existing trees within the objector's garden ground which partially obscure that. It might not do so necessarily all year round. So hence my reference within my delivery to the fact that a condition could be used to look at either a high level window solution or a single aspect window solution, which would then point windows away from there. But that's something that we could control via planning condition, particularly for probably the 2 or 3 closest windows to that southern boundary with Piper Row and Swans Acre. Probably doesn't have to be all the windows, because some of them are quite far away from the mutual boundary and at quite an angle.
Okay, my third question was basically what you've partially answered it. Could you explain what a single aspect window is?
So they are frequently used, I'm going to say frequently, they can be used for a position when it provides a build out or oblique angle, which then directs the window away from affected property. So it then just angles it away. So it will require a build out from the face of the building, which then pushes the window away from the property. So there's no overlooking. The easier solution is to have a high level window where the sill level will be about 1.6 metres in height. It then kind of would affect the desirability of anybody occupying that premise, but that would be for the applicant or their agent to consider which design solution is the best.
Okay. Oh, Bailey McLaren.
Yeah, thank you, convener. Maybe a bit of a daft laddie question. Obviously, this building is a commercial building that pays commercial rates. Will when these units, if we pass this application, when these units are concluded, will that still be rated, or is that then turned into council tax residential? How does this work? Thank you.
Apologies, Bailey McLaren, I was trying to come in too quickly. It would be commercial rates for short-term lets.
Thank you, everyone. Any further questions? No further questions. Can I ask for a motion? Bailey Williamson.
Yeah, my motion is to approve, convener.
Councillor Illingworth, are you seconding the motion?
Happy to second, convener.
Thank you. And I see that everything's flashing by me. Councillor Cuthbert, you have an amendment.
Yes, convener, it's to accept the application as it stands, but to put in a condition that the windows on the western elevation should be high level windows or single aspect. My preference would be single aspect.
Bailey Williamson, are you willing to incorporate that in your motion?
Yeah, quite happy to incorporate that.
And Councillor Illingworth, are you happy with that?
Happy.
Need a second, but right. So there, you okay with that, Councillor Cuthbert? Yes. Yeah. Okay. So there's no amendments. So therefore, can I ask if anyone has a comment on the paper? No comment. Therefore, permission is granted. Thank you. Moving swiftly on to the last item, which is the erection of a dwelling house at land 15 metres east of Borrowdale, Blair Adam, Kelty Bridge. And to introduce the report to speak to the report is Mr. Williamson. Thank you.
Thank you again. The last local item on the agenda today relates to the subdivision of existing garden ground of the host property Borrowdale in order to create a new plot and associated dwelling house at Kelty Bridge. The existing site is contained within the existing settlement boundary. This application has been referred to committee in light of the receipt of an objection from the Cleash and Blair Adam Community Council, which indicated that they felt the proposal was contrary to National Planning Framework 4 and the Local Development Plan 2 policies on placemaking, and due to a detrimental impact on the setting and views of a listed building. In addition, a further 3 letters of objection were also received, which, in addition to the matters raised by the Community Council, also flagged concerns with road safety. I will now take members through a short presentation to deal with the proposals further. Next slide, please. Here we can see the location of the site, which lies to the western side of Main Street and Kelty Bridge. The boundary between Perth and Kinross and Fife Council lies at the second T of street on the annotation. Next slide, please. We now have the location plan, which shows the relationship of the application site to that of the applicant's land, the remainder of which is outlined in blue. As members shall note, the red line boundary area is comparable to many of the wider plot sizes, including those of Middleton Park to the north. Next slide, please. Next, we see the site plan, which shows the main access arrangements, with it being obtained directly from Main Street, while the Borrowdale access would remain to be taken from the Blair Adam Road to the north. The plan also shows the private lane to the south and the relationship of the site to the Category C listed buildings, which back onto it. Next slide, please. Next, we see the detailed floor plan and site plan. It shows the arrangement of the proposed 4-bedroom property. It also shows the retaining wall towards Borrowdale and the provision of 3 car parking spaces and the surface water attainment crates beneath the driveway. The plan also shows that the existing hedge would be retained and then at the access point also reduced in height. Next slide, please. Members shall now see the respective front and rear elevations. To the front, the walling would comprise rubble stone walls and white render to the sides and rear. The roof would also be clad with a clay pantile roof. The front elevation at the top also illustrates notable change in levels from the adjacent dwelling down to this part of the site. Next slide, please. Next, we see the respective side elevations and site sections. Again, this shows the 2.5 metre retaining wall, which is already in situ, and the hip nature of the proposed roof away from the existing dwelling. It also shows at the bottom how the roof ridge level would be below that of the eaves level of the adjacent listed buildings, and also set relatively far back from Main Street. I will now take members through a series of photographs taken on my site visit last week. Next slide, please. This first image shows an enhanced aerial shot above the site prior to the site clearance and retaining wall being formed. It also shows the layout of the surrounding plots. Next slide, please. The next image shows the view from the corner of Main Street with Blair Adam Road and also illustrates the level of containment achieved due to the height of the existing hedge. The gable of the C-listed buildings can be seen just on the left-hand side. Next slide, please. These next images show the C-listed buildings from the south on the top left image, from due east on the upper right image, and then the view eastwards from the private lane, again showing the height of the existing hedge on the left. Next slide, please. Next, we see the images from the south of the site, with the gable of Borrowdale on the left, and just visible in the lower section are the vehicles of the applicant below the retaining wall. The right-hand image is from towards the southeastern corner of the site, looking back towards Borrowdale, and again shows the change in levels between the parts of the wider site. Next slide, please. The next image shows the view northwards from the south of the proposed house location, and again shows the retaining wall and levels difference, together with the containment achieved with the existing hedge. Next slide, please. This photograph shows the view southwards from the existing access to Borrowdale from Blair Adam Road, with the roofs of the C-listed buildings just visible beyond. Next slide, please. These penultimate photos show the view southwards from slightly further up Main Street, Kelty Bridge. Sorry. So these photos are from the case officer's visit and show the view west from the site access location back towards Borrowdale, the applicant's property. On the right-hand side is the current transition from Borrowdale down to the lower part of the site. Next slide, please. And this last photograph shows the view southwards from slightly further up Main Street, Kelty Bridge, to give a better idea of the context and approach on the main road, with the high hedge not only obscuring into the site, but also views of the listed buildings beyond. The proposed dwelling would be sited into the site above the car at the junction. Next slide, please. Thank you, Convener. That now concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Williamson. Can I ask, do members have any questions for officers? Councillor Cuthbert.
Thank you, Convener. Yeah, the containment wall and the works that have been done below that, is that consented or is that unconsented?
That's unconsented, and obviously they're seeking to regularise that through this application.
Any further questions? No further questions. Can I ask for a motion? Councillor Cuthbert, point of order.
Yes, I was hoping to take a 5-10 minute recess to talk to the legal representative. I'm minded to put forward a motion to refuse. So I'd like to clarify the details of that with him.
You okay then? Matt? Okay, folks, this is us back. Can I ask for a motion? Oh, Councillor Cuthbert, you put forward a motion.
That's being a bit cheeky. Thank you, Convener. Yes, I would like to put forward a motion to refuse. I've got several policies that I think this development breaches. I've got policy 27A, which is to do with the historical setting. Policies 1A and 1BC, and policy 17, which is to do with enhancing the character of the area. Just to give the background to this, Kelty Bridge is a beautiful village. It's got 8 listed buildings on Main Street, which this property is going to be sitting on, and 2 of those buildings are almost adjacent, and they're going to be affected by this development. My view is that the actual building is going to be quite prominent, and it's going to affect the setting of the village, and it's going to be jarring as you come into the village from the north, from Maryborough. So my proposal is to refuse on the basis of these policies, and if Jeff could come back and confirm the numbers.
Sorry, I misheard that. I will go further. Convener, if those are the concerns that Councillor Cuthbert has, the policies that he's referenced do support that general position.
Thank you. Councillor Braun, you're seconding?
Yes, Convener, happy to second.
Thank you. Bailey, you have an amendment.
Yes, Convener, thank you. I wish to move an amendment to the extent of moving the original officer proposal that's in front of us. I'm of the view, actually, looking at the visuals here, that this development would improve the aspect of the village. There's already a bungalow that's quite incongruous in its design to the surrounding listed buildings. So I think the argument would go from my side that actually the setting of those listed buildings is already somewhat spoilt, and this application makes no difference here nor there to that. So I'd be happy to please move the officer recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Bailey Williamson, you're seconding that?
Yes, I'm happy to second Bailey's amendment.
Thank you. Bailey McClan, you have a point of clarity.
Yeah, it's just surrounding if the application, if the Councillor Cuthbert's motion is successful. Mr. Williamson was, in one of his responses was there was a wall that had not been received planning permission. Would that then require a separate planning permission, or would that require the wall to be removed?
Thank you, Billy McLaren. In that instance, obviously, if the refusal was met with members, we would obviously have to allow the opportunity for the applicant to submit an appeal to the DPEA. Only at that point, once that had been exhausted, would we then consider the actions going forward, whether that be a formal application for the wall itself or whether enforcement action would be necessary.
Thanks, Bailey McLaren. Just to further expand upon that from an enforcement perspective, you maybe saw in the photographs that Paul had shown that there was some caravans present. We've had a separate planning enforcement investigation regarding the use of the land to date, but we haven't included the wall because obviously that was subject to this application. But if this application is refused and an appeal is unsuccessful, we would be looking at that wall also. That's not to say it would be taken away, but we would look to try and resolve the planning harm.
Thank you. And if any further amendment? No. Can I ask members if they have any comment on the report? No comment. I ask Councillor Cuthbert if he wants to sum up.
I think I've covered most of it, Convener.
And I'll invite Bailey, if he wish to sum up.
Yes, just very briefly. I think it's not the topic for debate today, but I think many of us here would agree that we are in a housing crisis or a housing emergency of sorts, and this creates a housing unit. It may well get through at appeal anyway, so why not approve it now and give someone a home sooner rather than later? Thank you.
Thank you for that. I will now hand over to Mr. Fogg to confirm the terms of the motion and the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Convener. The motion is made by Councillor Cuthbert, seconded by Councillor Braun, which is to refuse the application on the basis that the proposal, its design and setting are contrary to Policy 27A, which seeks to protect the listed buildings, that is contrary to background policies of LDP 2 1A and 1BC. 1A, general background and compatibility, 1BC, forgotten. 1BC is the requirement that the density and design should complement the surroundings in which it's located, and residential policy 17 provides that residential developments should look to complement and enhance the character of a village or area. And as I say, that motion by Councillor Cuthbert is seconded by Councillor Braun. The amendment is made by Bailey, which is to approve the application in accordance with the recommendation in the report of handling, and that amendment is seconded by Bailey Williamson. I'll pass over to Jess Guild to take the roll call vote.
Thank you. Members, when I call your name, please let me know if you're voting for the motion to refuse or the amendment to grant. Councillor Allen.
Amendment.
Councillor Anderson.
Amendment.
Bailey.
Amendment.
Councillor Braun.
Motion.
Councillor Cuthbert.
Motion.
Councillor Harvey.
Amendment.
Councillor Illingworth.
Amendment.
Councillor Massey.
Amendment.
Bailey McLaren.
Motion.
Councillor McPherson.
Amendment.
Councillor Reid.
Motion.
Councillor Stewart.
Amendment.
And Bailey Williamson.
Amendment.
Thank you. Members, I have 4 votes for the motion and 9 for the amendment, and therefore the amendment will carry.
Thank you for that. With the amendment carried, the permission is therefore granted subject to the report of handling. Thank you. We now move on to item 6, proposal of application notices, and the first one up is for the formation of a 49.9 megawatt battery storage facility and associated works at land 200 metres north of Pitcairn House, Newborough Road, Abernethy. Do we have any comments on the? Councillor Illingworth.
Thank you, convener. Got eight comments and I'll work through them very quickly. Firstly, there's a water supply to Balgony farmhouse goes underneath the site, if that could be taken account of. It's proximity to housing at Elm Bank and Sandylands Grove. Fire risk, screening as in vegetation screening. The fact that there's an active travel route proposed to go through the site, and that screening plants should be amenable to that active travel route. The noise of the plant. Am I going too fast? And the fact that it's prime agricultural land, and ask you to consider that there are a total of 7 similar facilities planned in the vicinity of Abernethy substation. Right, thank you very much.
So just to confirm, Councillor Illingworth, that is consider water supply under the site, consider proximity to residential properties, fire risk, screening and vegetation, the proposed active travel route, noise pollution, prime agricultural land and cumulative impact.
Thank you. Any further comments? No further comments. Oh, sorry. Bailey McLaren.
Thank you. I would also echo the cumulative impact concern, because there are many in that area going through the process of application. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now move on to the next one, which is the formation of a 49.9 megawatt battery storage facility and associated works at land 300 metres west of Killen. Any comments? No comments. Okay, thank you. That ends today's proceedings. So thank you very much for everybody watching and for the committee members. Thank you very much.